Do we have that kind of trust that we're talking about, that Jesus talked about? And does our trust have borders? And if it does, what are the borders that we are putting in? Because the idea is that our trust shouldn't have borders, but what borders have we put in place, and how can we, through our reflection and readings and understandings, how can we get rid of those if we do have it? The idea of trust, right? We need trust in our daily lives. And Kardec understood this as well. When he asked the spirits in question 766, is social life founded in nature? Right? Are we supposed to be living in society? Are we supposed to be living with other people? And the spirits said, yes, certainly, we are. We're supposed to be living as a society. That's how we're created. God made human beings to live in a society. And living in a society, we are trying to constantly balance our self-interest and interests of other people. And this is the fact that we are interdependent. We are not born to live by ourselves. So it's not just about what do I want. It's not just about what the other people want. It's finding that balance. Because we need to trust others. And that need for trust is going to come from our interdependence with other people. How are we going to live in a society? How are we going to live with other people if we can't trust them? Right? That would be impossible. Because we can't put our belief and our confidence in other people if we lack that trust. And this is just something in our daily lives. We might be asking, what is the difference, right, between trust and faith? Because a lot of times we talk between the two as if they're the same. We're going to present them being a little different today. So the definition of faith that we're going to use, faith being a noun, right? So it's a thing that we have, a belief we have. Something we have, a firm belief. Instead of believe, just say belief. So something that we have that we trust, so being a noun. Trust, on the other hand, it's going to be a verb. I have trust, I trust you, I trusted you, right? Trusting others. Something we do. It's a choice. It's faith in action. So when we talk about trust this morning, I want you guys to understand, this is faith being put into action. So it's not just the belief I have, I'm actually doing something with that belief. So trust is, if we put it together, faith in action, it's our willingness to be vulnerable, based on the confidence that the other person is going to do something. We're not going to just trust someone just because. We're going to trust someone believing that that person is going to be benevolent, honest, open, reliable, and competent. Because if we can't trust that person to do those things, then we're not going to fully trust the other person. And we shouldn't trust the other person if they're not showing at least signs of these things. The picture here, I don't know if you guys can see it also, it has the shape of a heart. On this side, there's a person kneeling down, holding onto the rope, right? And then on the other side, there's a smaller person walking on that rope, right there. But that person needs to trust that the other person is not going to let go, right? Because otherwise, how are you going to walk across that very thin rope, not trusting that the other person is going to hold on to it, and then we can actually cross. So the idea that trust comes from that willingness to be vulnerable, right? If we're going to walk across a fine line, we are going to be vulnerable because we don't know. There are a lot of things that are going to be uncertain. But we need to believe that the other person is going to be there on the other side, holding on to that. And that's the fine line between trust and distrust. Right? Sometimes we're like, oh, I trust this person, but then we're constantly checking, we're following up, then it's not really that type of trust, because maybe that person is not always reliable. Maybe sometimes, maybe not always. So now we're going to take a look at these different characteristics. What does it mean that a person is benevolent, honest, open, reliable, and competent? So benevolence, right? We start out by looking at that little picture there. Someone is benevolent, right? It's raining, everyone fits in, everyone is covered, everyone is protected because this person is being benevolent. They're being caring, they care for others, showing goodwill, right? Expecting the best, supporting other people when they're in need, expressing appreciation, being fair, and having unconditional positive regard, right? So we're not holding on to the other person being like, oh, I'm only going to be benevolent, I'm only going to be good to you if you do this in return. So a benevolent person is not going to do that. They're going to be benevolent no matter what. They're going to be good, they're going to be caring, and they're going to make sure that the other people are taken care of before themselves. So this will be a person who's benevolent, right? We can trust someone who we know is going to care towards us, right? This person is not going to do anything to harm me, so I can trust that person. Honesty being the second one, right? So looking at the picture again, our compass. If honesty, integrity is always going to be our north, and we're always going towards it, then that person is going to show honesty, and we can trust that that person is going to have integrity, be telling the truth most of the time, keeping up their promises, because sometimes we make a lot of promises, but it's hard to keep up with all our promises, but we should be aiming towards that. Honoring the agreements that we make, showing authenticity, because we don't want to be posing as fakes, because the person will be able to tell. Because if we're trying to be someone who we're not, it's going to be hard to tell the truth all the time, to keep our promises. And accepting responsibility. And in Spiritism, we're always called to accept responsibility. If we make a mistake, if we do something we weren't supposed to, accepting responsibility, apologizing, moving on, trying not to make the same mistakes again. So when a person is showing these characteristics, we know we can trust them. They're not going to be perfect all the time, but they will be trying to keep their promises and to show us that they care and they have integrity. Openness, right? It's going to be key to a good dialogue, to good communication. If the person is always closed off, if they don't give us room to open, to communicate, to talk, it'll be hard to trust because we never know what they're thinking. We never know what's going on. How can I trust someone who's not open to share with me what they're thinking? So it's important to have open communication, sharing important information. If something is important to us, it would be nice to share with the other person so the other person knows as well. Delegating tasks, right? Because if we're always trying to do everything ourselves, it means we don't trust the other people. And if we don't trust others, it's going to be hard for them to trust us as well. Sharing decision making, that also shows that we trust. Sharing power. And then reliability. Right? When we're reliable, it means we can be trusted because we do things we say we're going to do. So for example, we're going to be showing consistency. We do it often enough. We're dependable, showing dependability. Commitment. I'm not going to change my mind every now and then. Dedication. We're also going to be showing diligence. So we're going to be careful. We're going to be very thoughtful with our actions, kind of like showing that strong chain. We're not going to break easily. We have our commitment is strong, and people can believe in us because our work is going to be dependable. And the last one that we've talked about is competence, right? So we look about here the different pieces of the puzzle. They come together. Someone is competent, they can master that. They can put the pieces together. They have the works, they have the knowledge to do that. And we're going to show competence in handling difficult situations. Can we do that? Can we handle ourselves? Can we help other people in difficult situations? Can we show results? Our work, through the things we do, are we achieving those results? Problem solving will be another characteristic. Conflict resolution, can we try to solve the problems together? Being flexible, because we're not always going to have it all our way, right? Sometimes we're going to have to be flexible, make adjustments. And modeling hard work. Because if we're going to be confident, if we're going to expect these of other people, we need to be doing it ourselves as well. So those will be some of the characteristics of someone we could trust. And we can think in our lives, like the people we know, do they show these factors, right? They probably don't have all of them, but they have signs of each of these characteristics. And these are the people we truly trust. Our dear friends, our closest friends, some family members. Those are the people that we would rely on. And we would trust that if they're holding on to that rope on the other side, they're not going to let go. So some questions for us to reflect. Do we, right, have trust in ourselves? And this is an individual question that each person can ask. Do I trust myself? Do I trust my decisions? Do I trust the choices I make? So this will be one of the questions. I'm going to start with this. Do I trust myself? Do we have trust in Spiritism? Right? And being here this morning, I will believe that most of us do. But what is that trust founded on? What is the foundation for that trust? I'm going to look a little bit at that. Do we have trust in God? Right? Do we truly have that trust? And then we're going to come back to that question. Does our trust have borders? If yes, what are they? What are the borders that we're putting in that's not letting our trust go beyond those borders? So we're going to look at each of these questions, and then we're going to come back to them at the end, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more to reflect on and to think about. So again, first one, do we trust ourselves, right? And we see that confidence in one's own strength gives men, in capital letters, meaning humanity, the capacity to carry out material things which he would not be able to do if he doubted himself. So having confidence in oneself is going to be important to do the things we need to do. Because if every step we take, we go back to like, wait, am I supposed to be doing this? Am I doing this wrong? Do I know what I need to do? We're never going to move forward, right? Being at our workplace, with our family, all of those things. If we're constantly doubting ourselves, it's going to be hard to do. So we kind of have a confidence scale, right? We can go from 0, meaning not going to happen. I don't believe I can do it. I can never do it. It's impossible. Then we go, I'm getting a little worried. Not very comfortable doing this. Then we go into like, not sure. You know, we're kind of like in between. Do I go? Do I not go? So our faith, our trust is, oscillating. Probably okay. We got to that point, yeah, I'm feeling good enough. I think I can do this. Not too bad, not too hard. And I think it's Staples. You guys might have seen that easy one that Staple had. That was easy, right? Sometimes we're like, oh, that's easy. I could do that. And then the last one, confident and happy, being a 10. So when we're feeling confident and happy, we feel like we can do these things. Now, going with this confidence rating scale, it's difficult sometimes not to go overboard and go from like confident to being presumptuous, right? Because we don't want to have the idea that we can do it alone. Confidence doesn't mean we can do it alone. It means that we believe that we have the skills and the abilities to do it. Doesn't mean we're prideful, like, oh, I can do it better than everybody else, or I'm the only one who can do this. This is not what this is. This is just the idea that I can do this, I'm confident in my abilities, I'm not doing it alone, but I can do it. Okay, if I have to, I can do it myself. And trusting in ourselves also comes during the moments of struggle. Because calmness during struggle is always going to be a sign of our strength and our confidence. Whereas on the contrary, violence represents weaknesses and self-doubt. So every time we become angry, every time we become violent in one way or another, either towards ourselves or towards other people, we're showing a sign of weakness. Because looking at this picture over here, there's a big storm going around us, right? Thunderstorm, the lightning and everything, but there is a place of calmness in the middle. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be there, but it means that we can find our place, our calm place, right? Our Zen place, some people will call that. So finding that calmness during a struggle is a sign that we have confidence. We have confidence in ourselves, like, this is something temporary. It's going to pass. This storm is not always going to be here. And we can have that understanding. And that's going to come from trust. I trust that I believe in myself. I'm not alone. Things are going to get better. And we have that understanding. Then we can talk a little bit about trust in spiritism, right? How can we trust the spirits? How can we trust the works of Kardec and the codification? And if we never ask that question, it's a question that we can ask ourselves. So like, can I really trust it? We're here, we believe we can. But the foundation of the works, right, we're going to talk a little bit about the universal control of the spirit teachings in the introduction to the gospel according to Spiritism. And the spirits tell us, and Kardec, through his work and his scientific methods of study, he was able to look at different places, different spirits, right? Because as the spirits will tell us, God wished the new revelations, right, of Spiritism, the spirits of truth, to reach mankind by the quickest and most authentic path. So he, God, entrusted the spirits to deliver them from the North Pole to the South Pole, manifesting everywhere without conferring the exclusive privilege of hearing these words to any one individual. So previous revelations, right, being with Moses and then with Jesus, they came through one individual. But now, they're coming from different spirits at different places. And that's the quickest way and most authentic way to represent it. And they continue. One person might be deceived, could even deceive themselves, right? If it was just through one person, that person could be wrong. And they could, through that, deceive themselves. But this cannot happen when millions of people see and hear the same thing. This constitutes a guarantee for each one and for all. So the spirits are very clear on that. When we look at the picture, being a network that goes everywhere at the same time, right? It's being interconnected, it's connecting different parts of the world, all happening at the same time. And when you have millions and millions of people saying the same thing, we can trust it, right? It's going to be reliable. It's going to have the characteristics we looked at before. So they had open communication, they were reliable, they were competent in what they were saying. And we can see that from the works and the words they were bringing, we could trust the spirits. We could trust the message that they were bringing, because it wasn't just something random that Kardec picked up. He did a lot of work, he did a lot of studies to guarantee. And the spirits don't use that word guarantee a lot in the codification. They said this is a guarantee to each individual and to all humanity, that this will be the works of the Spirit of Truth. So knowing that we can trust in ourselves, we can trust in Spiritism, we come to a bigger question, right? Trust in God. And through a lot of studies that have been done, people will ask, right, when someone is asked whether or not he or she believes in God, the answer is an affirmative most of the time. With rare exceptions, people are going to say yes. I believe in God, right? And even the money, right, the dollar we use, we see it on the bills, we see it on the coins, in God we trust. So this idea that we trust God is part of our society. It's part of our common belief. Everyone believes in this idea that we can trust in God. But then we can look a little closer. So people are saying that they believe in God. And those numbers, for the most part, are not decreasing as drastically. But on the other end, the number of people who are suffering and who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and other disease, that's on the increase. It's increasing. So strangely, right, despite the high number of people who say they believe in God, equally high is the number of despair, depressed, and desperate people. So how could that be? Right? So we have a group of people who on the outside are saying, I'm fine, right? You ask them how they're doing, I'm fine. But on the inside, even though they're expressing their outward belief, they're depressed, they're sad, they're hurt, confused, lonely, unloved, feeling judged, misunderstood, feeling insignificant, broken, dying on the inside. So all those things are happening to these people who are saying they do believe in God. So why that disconnect? And sometimes, even here, right, in Spiritist Center, we're going to find people who on the outside, they look fine. And they tell you, how you doing? I'm fine. But if we don't go a little deeper, and if we don't try to look, between the lines, we're going to miss it. And these friends of ours are going through things that we don't know. It's not that they don't believe in something, it's that at that moment in time, there's some sort of disconnect. And this disconnect will come from different reasons. But how can we try to explain, right? How? Even though these people, all of us, we're saying we believe in God, the good and loving Father who sees and knows it all, how can we still fall in despair? Right? On the question 13 of the Spirit's book, Kardec asks about the different attributes of God, right? So we know that God is infinite and eternal, God is unchangeable, God is immaterial, unique, all-powerful, and you get to the last one, right? God is sovereignly just and good. So there's no question about that. He's not just and good, he's sovereignly there. He's the only one. The wisdom of the divine laws is revealed as clearly in the smallest things as in the and radius, right? So God's justice comes from like the atoms and the molecules all the way to the whole universe and all the galaxies. This wisdom makes it impossible to doubt either God's justice or goodness. He cares just as much for the little animal as much as he does for, human creation and all the other creation in between. So we do believe in that, and we see the proof of this in our daily lives. We go outside, we see the sun shining, right? The moon, the stars, all of these things, but we also see the little ants following their pattern. So all creation is showing us these attributes of God. So how can we still sometimes fall into despair? How can we still doubt? I'm going to tell a little story. A story of lack of faith, lack of trust in God. So once upon a time, there was a climber who decided that after many years of training and preparation, he was going to climb up the highest mountain in South America. Because he wanted all the glory to himself, he decided to perform the task on his own, right? So this climb over here, he went from having confidence in himself to being prideful, right? He wanted all the glory just to himself. So he decided he was going to go alone. So he went on this journey. He was going to hike up, he was going to climb up the highest mountain. But during that process, when he was going up, he didn't expect the conditions of the air to be as tough as they were. So he was having a really hard time climbing. And it ended up taking him longer than he expected. It started to get dark. He didn't pack enough things so he could stay over, right? So he couldn't camp. So he was like, okay, I have to finish. So he kept on going. It kept getting darker and darker. And the story tells that that night there was no stars, no moonlight, just complete darkness. And when he was about to reach the top, about 100 meters away, he stepped on a loose rock and he began to fall. He began to fall, free fall, right? He was still tied by the rope, but all of a sudden when the rope reached its end, that's when he stopped. And he was just hanging there in the middle of the darkness by himself. No idea what was around him. He couldn't see anything, complete darkness. And he started to feel despair. And in those silent moments that he was just hanging there in the air in total darkness, he thought about God. And he decided to ask for help, right? So he didn't think about God when he was beginning his climb, when he was preparing, but in that moment of despair, he was like, well, maybe I should ask God for help. So, oh my God, please help me. So he pleaded in that moment when he was hanging there. He suddenly heard a low and deep voice, right, in his conscience, that seemed to be talking to the depths of his soul. So inside his soul, he heard a reply. What do you want from me, my son? Right? So what do you want from me? You ask my help? No. Oh, and it's kind of interesting when we see here, God clearly knows what he needs, right? He's hanging there. His life is like hanging by the rope. God knows what he needs. But God asks, let me see, right, my son, very loving, what do you need? What do you want from me? And he replies, save me, please. He mentally answers. So he's having his conversation, praying to God, like, save me, please. So he pleads for God to help him. And the voice insisted, and this is the interesting part. Do you really believe that I can save you? Right? God asks, do you really believe that? Because a lot of times when we come to that idea that we say we do, our lips are saying we believe, but how about our hearts, right? How about our soul? Do we really believe that? Because remember, in the beginning of the story, he decided he was going to do this alone, right? His belief in God was not part of that journey. His belief in God just appeared when he needed. So God is like, do you really, really believe that I can save you? I am sure, my God, said the spirit climber, right? He is a spirit. Yeah, he believes. It's his only hope. What else is he going to do? He had no choice, right? So he's saying that he believes. So the voice replies, right? Then cut off the rope that hangs you in the air, the voice recommended. And then he had probably to stop and think, like, what do you mean? I'm hanging by the rope. You want me to cut the rope? Can't be. right? Can't be. He's probably thinking. The man stayed in silence for a moment. Then he grabbed to the rope as tight as he could. He's like, there's no way I'm going to cut this rope. So he started to hold on to his own will, stronger than he had before. God clearly asked him before, do you really believe that I can save you? He said, yes, I am sure. It's not even like, yes, I'm sure I got it. Then God told him what to do. He decided not to, right? So he held on to the rope as tight as he could. So this is the picture, right? Him holding on to the rope with both hands. The rescue team tells the story that on the following day, the climber was found dead, frozen, holding to the rope with both hands, only 6 feet away from the ground. Right? So he couldn't see it. He couldn't see what was around him. God clearly knew. But what did he do? He didn't trust, right? He said he did, but he didn't trust. He was what? This much away from the ground. He could have just cut the rope, fallen to the ground, walked away, and he would have survived. But he didn't. He held on. He didn't see what was beneath him. He didn't see what was around him. So he chose to trust himself instead of trusting in God at that moment. And this is a story that's going to illustrate, we're going to look a little closer, what caused him to do that. He said he believed. He wanted God to help. God gave him the response. He didn't believe it. So what caused the lack of faith in the story is that the climber lacked sight. He couldn't see, right? He couldn't see what was around him. Had the sun been shining or the moon been bright that night, he would have realized that by cutting the rope, he was just falling to the ground and he could have been safe. But that didn't happen. And a lot of times, in our moments of highest need, we can't see either. We can't see what's around. We can't see past that situation. And that's the moment when we need that trust. We need that faith in action. Comparing to the sunshine with the light of knowledge, we can understand why our faith is hesitating still. Because when we illuminate our faith, when we have something to back it up with, the light of reason, it becomes so firm that nothing can take it away from us. When we have the understanding. When we have the understanding, our faith becomes that light. Right? When we have knowledge, when we have understanding, we have reasons to believe. It's not just a blind faith anymore. We're going to get to the point where our faith can really move mountains, like Jesus said, right? And if our faith is going to be guided by our knowledge, it might move the mountains, move the obstacles, move the difficulties out of our way. Because it's no longer a vague belief, but is an unshaken conviction. And we truly believe in that. And this is where Kardec talks about the rationalized faith. We're moving from blind faith to something that's backed up with reason. And due to the non-acceptance of any proofs, right, when we just blindly believe in something, blind faith leaves the spirit with a feeling of emptiness, which gives birth to doubt. When we stop and think, like, maybe not, this is where that moment, when we don't have any proofs, when we don't have understandings. Rationalized faith, when based in facts and logic, leaves no doubts. Right? We understand the attributes of God, we truly believe in them, we see the proofs of His works. There's no room for doubt when we look at that. Then the person believes because they're certain, and no one can be certain unless they understand something. Right? We might, I've been told this, I've been told that, but if they don't truly understand, their faith is not going to be unshaken. And Kardec and the spirits will tell us this is why they are unshakable. Because unshakable faith is that which can stand face to face with reason in all ages of humanity. If we can't face reason, if our faith cannot come to those tough questions at times, then it's not going to be unshakable. Then the slightest wind is going to shake our faith away. It's going to take it away. And these are the times when we're going to think about, okay, what do I believe, right? This is why it's important that we question, what are the foundations of our beliefs? And does our trust have borders? So we'll get to that question. So clearly, the climber, his faith had borders. towards, as long as I can see, and as long as your will is my will, then we're good. I trust you. But as long as you're trying to do something that I don't agree with, I'm not going to do it anymore. So these are the borders that he had. But we're going to tell another story, right, from the gospel. When Jesus was walking on the water, and Peter had an opportunity to have trust in Jesus too, when Jesus was walking. So just a little bit of a context. After Jesus had that, well, maybe we'll call it a miracle, right, where he fed 5,000 people, and people were there, and he turned, I believe it was 5 loaves and 3 fish, and he fed 5,000 people, right? In the spiritual sense, right, that he fed, they were all satisfied with the word of God, and they left. So after that, Jesus left the disciples, told them to get on the boat and cross to the other side, and he went to the mountain to pray by himself. So he went, he was praying to God, and afterwards, in the middle of the night, the disciples saw a light, right, walking through the water. So he was walking on the water towards them. And the disciples were afraid. The disciples were really afraid. They were like, is that a ghost? Who's coming? They didn't know. And sometimes this happened to us too, because there was a storm going on at that time, and they couldn't really see who was coming from far away. Sometimes in our lives, we're going through difficult times, the storms, tribulations, different things. And even though we spend a lot of time with Jesus, we know his word, we read the gospel, we're looking to be more like Jesus, we don't recognize him in the middle of the storm. And sometimes we're going to hear that voice that's going to tell us to cut the road, and we don't want to do it because we don't know who is it coming from. We don't recognize him. And the same thing happened to the disciples. They didn't recognize Jesus. But when Jesus said, right, it is I. So Jesus even said to them, take courage, right? It is I. Don't be afraid. So they could hear Jesus as Jesus was walking towards them. And Peter said, Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water. And Jesus said, come. Right? Peter answered, like, if it's really you, tell me to come and walk on the water too, and I'll go. Come, he said. Then Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. So Peter asked, right, being proactive, like, oh, let me go and follow you. And he did, and he walked on the water and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, and when he saw what was happening, the storm around him, he was afraid, and he started to sink. Right? How many of us sometimes we do want to follow, and we go, and we take that courage, we take that leap of faith, we start going towards it, just like Peter did, but then we go back and we're like, wait, look at all these things around me. These are so tough. Right? I can't do this anymore. And we take our eyes off Jesus, and we try to look at ourselves, and we start to sink. Because we don't have the answers at that moment. It's not enough to just trust in ourselves. So this is the moment where Peter doubted. He looked around like, wait, the wind is too much, this is too hard, I can't do it. So he cried out, Lord, save me, because he started to sink. And Jesus replied, right? Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? Right? And a lot of times we can hear that voice, the voice of Jesus, asking us that question. Why did you doubt me? Right? Even if you couldn't do it, I was going to be right there, immediately to catch you, immediately to hold on to you if you started to fall. But sometimes we don't realize it. Right? And looking back at what we talked about, review what trust is. Peter had everything, right, to trust in Jesus. He had every reason to trust that Jesus was not going to lead him astray. Jesus was benevolent, honest, open, reliable, competent. He just fed 5,000 people. They're all satisfied. That had just happened. Peter had seen him do many other things that were great and good. But at that same time, he still had that moment of doubt. And as we search within our own hearts, we might find ourselves to be much like Peter at moments. We have an immediate courage to do something. We have that initial trust. But as the winds and the waves and the difficulties of life come our way, we take our eyes off Jesus and we begin to sink. We begin to sink for different reasons, right? Because we have borders around our trust. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's selfishness, maybe it's pride, anger, or regret. Whatever the thing that's holding us back is whatever is going to cause us to take our eyes off Jesus in those moments where we need trust the most. And those borders are going to keep us where we are. Those borders are going to cause us to sink until we ask for help. Help will come, but we need to trust when the help does come also. There's a little piece of a song, it's only about a minute, that I want to play. It's a song called Oceans, Where My Feet May Fail. And he has that idea of trust without borders in reference to what Peter had to do, right? Peter had to walk on the water. And it's just the idea that he needed to trust in order to do it. It wasn't up to him, right, to do it. He just needed to trust, and he was able to do it. So we're just going to take a minute to listen, and then we're going to come to our final conclusion. Is the sound on?
Let's see the sound.
Sorry.
You have to have faith.
Yes, we're going to have trust the technology. It's only a minute, but it's a very beautiful song that's longer than this. And I think in those times where we're not sure that we can do it, it causes us, it brings us back to that piece of like, please, make me stronger.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's see if it's ready.
So the lyrics call us to reflect, right? Spirit leads me where my trust is without borders. So what is the spirit that's going to lead us to that trust? It's the spirit of truth, right? Spiritism came to bring the spirit of truth, the spirit that's going to be with us forever. He's never going to leave us, the spirit. And it's going to make all things known. So once we have that understanding, when we have the rationalized faith, that's where our trust is going to be without borders. It's going to let us walk upon the waters of life, walk upon the difficult journeys that we face, the waves, right? The song talks about keeping our eyes above the waves. So we're not focused down on the waves, but we have our eyes focused on Jesus. Whatever you will call me. And sometimes we have a hard time understanding that, trusting that whatever we're called on, this is where we should be doing our work, having that trust. And sometimes we need to cut the rope and trust that this is where we need to do. This is where we need to go. And that's going to take us deeper than our feet could ever wander, because if we just rely on ourselves, we're not going to go very far. God has a much bigger plan and a much better path for us to follow. Take us deeper, different things, challenging things. And that's where our faith will be made stronger. When we have the understanding and we have the will and the trust to actually follow it. And the questions we looked at the beginning, right? Do we have trust in ourselves? Do we trust in spiritism? And what is that foundation we have? Do we trust in God? And what are the borders that we still have? What are the borders that we still have in our trust that we need to leave behind? That is not going to prevent us anymore from following Jesus, whatever He may call us, whatever may the things that we do. So where have we put our trust, right? He says, when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. One of the songs says, right? So whenever we are feeling overwhelmed, whatever we feel like we can't trust anymore, this is the time when we need to release and give it to God and trust that He's going to be there and He's going to help us no matter what. Okay? Any questions?